Hi, my name is Rita and I am 30 years old now. Looking back through the cloudy glass of memory, which has been so imprinted over the years that sometimes it is difficult to distinguish where the truth is and where it is just a feeling, I understand more and more clearly that my life began to slowly, almost imperceptibly collapse at the moment when I was 6, although then, of course, I could not realize it, did not have that inner vision that comes with age and pain. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. I remember how on that day, clear, with a sharp October sun, my father taught me to ride a bike, an old green bike with rusty spokes and a long scratch on the frame, which he called a battle scar. We were in the driveway of our house, and he was laughing and holding my back as I wobbled forward, awkwardly but with delight, as if I could fly at any moment. He would say, "Keep straight, don't look under the wheels, look into the distance. Over there, to the horizon, that's your path," and then it seemed to me that he was right, that with him I could drive even into the sky. And the next day, Mom was sitting on the edge of the sofa, clutching a cup of cold tea in her fingers, and her face was so empty that even the words when she told me that he would never come home again sounded like an echo of someone else's tragedy, which had happened not to us, but somewhere far away. It was just us, Mom and me. I'm sure she tried her best, although perhaps I didn't understand it right away, but an adult mind can see what a child's eyes refuse to notice. She lived in a world empty of love, with a broken heart and the need to survive. We moved into a small, dark apartment in a 9-story panel building, where in the winter there was always a draft from the cracks in the kitchen, and the wallpaper peeled off in the corners. Mom worked 2 jobs, came home late, exhausted too. The limit, cooked something simple, macaroni and cheese, scrambled eggs or soup from cubes, and, if she had any strength left, helped me with homework, and then, without taking off her coat, sat on the sofa and stared mindlessly at the TV until she fell asleep, not even waiting for the news. From the age of 6 to 12, my life was like a long gray ribbon, weekdays filled with loneliness, rare games with the neighbors' children, evenings with Mrs. Patterson, the nanny, a woman with the scent of lavender soap and woolen blouses, and my mother's shadow, sliding around the house, barely touching me. Sometimes she met with men. I remember the smells of their colognes, the laughter coming from the kitchen, and the click of heels on the floor when my mother hurried to the door, dressed up, with scarlet lipstick on her lips. On weekends I stayed with Mrs. Patterson, and my mother returned either joyful and silent, as if she carried something fragile inside her, or sad to the point of anger, and then slammed doors and smoked by the window, not noticing that I was standing behind her. None of them lingered. Mom always found fault with them, saying that she wasn't ready for a relationship, or that she needed to focus on work and me, but, as it seems to me now, this was just an attempt to hide her loneliness behind a screen of reasonable decisions. And then, when I was 12, everything changed. Mom met Gasper, a quiet, attentive accountant from her office, who had kind eyes and chestnut hair slightly graying at the temples. He was not like those I remembered before him. He was neither loud, nor charming, nor especially handsome, but there was something different about him, something stable, like a wall in a house that you can lean against when there is a storm. Gasper came to us often, first in the evenings, then on weekends. He listened when I told him about school, not pretending to be interested, but really listening, attentively, with questions, sometimes even with advice. "What do you think of Gasper?" Mom asked me one day, sitting next to me in the kitchen, when it was drizzling outside and he had just left. I shrugged. "He's normal," I answered, and it was true. He didn't try to be my father. Didn't shower me with gifts. Didn't call me baby or make me call me Uncle Gaspard. He just was, and that was enough. 6 months later, they got married, and we moved in with him, into a spacious, bright house where I got my own room with a window to the garden, and he helped me paint the walls my favorite purple, and then we hung up posters together. When I turned 13, Mom told me she was pregnant. I remember how her eyes sparkled, and how strangely, for the first time in a long time, she looked truly happy. I was happy too. I thought we would have a new, complete family, that everything would finally fall into place. The child turned out to be a girl, Agatha. She was small, all red and wrinkled, crying so loudly, as if demanding the world give her back, but to me she seemed perfect, so tiny, fragile and mine. But everything changed almost immediately. Mom quit her job and dove into motherhood like a whirlpool, headlong. with a desperate determination to be the perfect, flawless, all-controlling mother. She read endless articles and books, joined forums and communities, and could just sit for hours, unblinking, by Agatha's crib, watching her sleep, as if she were afraid that if she turned away, everything would disappear, and it was as if I ceased to exist. Now it was Gasper who picked me up from school, went with me to training, helped with homework, listened to about my life. Mom said more and more often, "Gasper, you need to spend more time with Agatha, she is your daughter," and when he stayed with me, she looked at us as if I were stealing something valuable from her. I began to feel guilty, not right away, unconsciously, but the feeling accumulated that my existence was interfering with the happiness of others. So the years passed. When I turned 17 and began to think about college, make lists, look for scholarships, talk to teachers, my mother still lived in Agatha's world. Her youngest daughter was everything to her, inspiration, light, an object of adoration. Every movement, every word, every drawing of hers, everything caused delight, as if the child were not just a child, but something exceptional. "Look, Agatha drew a flower," she said with admiration, handing the drawing to Gasper. "She is so artistic." And I brought home diplomas, certificates, excellent grades, and my mother, barely looking at me, would say tiredly, "How wonderful, dear," without even raising her head from the diapers or a book on child psychology. Gasper was the one who, together with me, with the patience that seemed enough for the whole world, studied university brochures, compared programs, leafed through course catalogs, as if this was not my path, but ours, as if he was looking for a solution no less important for himself than for me. We spent evenings at the kitchen table, set with cups of coffee, pencils and notebooks, and he always knew when to encourage, when to prompt, and when to just be silent next to me. He took me on tours of campuses, asked questions of teachers, wrote everything down in a notebook with a thick blue cover and smiled at me encouragingly when I was lost. When I was finally accepted to the state university on a partial scholarship, it was not just a joyful day, it was a triumph. Especially for him, because I saw in his eyes the same pride that I had not seen in anyone in my family for so long. He was in seventh heaven, clapping me on the shoulder as if I had won an Olympic medal, and telling me that I deserved it, that he always knew what I was capable of. In the end, he paid 30% of my tuition, the scholarship covered the rest, and for the remaining part one took out a loan, which at the time seemed quite affordable to me. Mom, despite all the talk about how important a good career is, did not offer a penny, did not show interest, did not ask if I needed help, just nodded when she heard about the admission, and switched back to the conversation about the new skirt she bought for Agatha, when I left for a new city to start a new life at college. Gasper was the only one who actually cried. My mother gave me a quick, barely looking hug and said, "Call us when you get there," and Agatha, who was 6 at the time, just stood in the doorway with a blank, distant expression on her face. "Say goodbye to your sister," my mother prompted, but the girl didn't move and, without blinking, said, "She's not my sister, she's just Rita." My mother laughed, as if it were something funny, some sweet, childish misunderstanding. "Oh, Agatha, don't be silly," she said, but I realized that the girl wasn't being silly at all. She meant it, and it made my heart go cold, like a draft had blown right through my chest. College became my salvation, my refuge, my new home, where I finally found myself among people who were interested in what I thought, what I felt, what I could do. I called home every week, but it was always Gasper on the other end of the line. We chatted about everything, my classes, my teachers, his job, even the movies we watched on the weekends. Mom rarely picked up the phone, and every conversation she had inevitably boiled down to news about Agata. Agata had lost her first tooth, Agata had learned to ride a bike, Agata had made a friend at school. Not once did she ask how I was doing, how I was coping with the workload, whether I had friends, whether I missed home. These conversations were like a draft through an open crack, cold, superficial, unreal. When I came home for the holidays or vacations, it seemed that only Gasper was concerned about my return. He greeted me at the door with hugs, cooked my favorite dishes, asked questions, listened to the answers. Mom was polite, but distant, as if I were a guest invited out of politeness. And Agatha looked at me as if I were a stranger. Once, when I came for Thanksgiving, she asked Mom, "Why is she here?" Mom was about to say something, but Gasper beat her to it. He said firmly, without a shadow of a doubt, because this is her home too, to which Agatha, unabashed, replied, "No, it's not, it's our home." Mom just shrugged, as if acknowledging her youngest daughter's rightness, and I felt myself disappearing, not physically, no, but more deeply, from their world, from their family landscape, as if I had never been a part of this home. After graduating, Gasper was around again. He used his connections to help me find a job in the city, and I rented a small but cozy apartment. Starting my adult life, we kept in touch. He called every couple of weeks, and our conversations became a tradition, a kind of anchor that helped me hold on. Mom, on the contrary, showed almost no interest when I did come home. I felt like a casual acquaintance who had dropped by for a while, and Agatha, having become a teenager, was already downright hostile. She did not speak to me, did not say hello, and every time I tried to talk to her, she responded as if I was interfering with her life. Mom seemed not to notice this, or maybe she just did not want to interfere. Only Gasper continued to be a real father to me, the only one who asked how I was feeling, how I was coping with work, whether I was dating anyone, whether I had made friends with the neighbors. My life flowed calmly: work in a marketing company, the gym, grocery shopping, Netflix on weekends. I could not say that I was happy, but I felt stable. I had recently bought my first place, a small but bright apartment, with a mortgage, but it was my own space, and I was proud of myself. Gasper would call and ask, "How's the new place? Have you put up the shelves yet?" "Yeah, finally," I'd say. It only took 3 tries and 2 trips to Home Depot. He'd laugh on the phone and say, "I could help you with that, you know." I know, but I wanted to figure it out myself, and he'd always encouraged it, always supported my desire to be independent. These conversations were like a breath of fresh air for me, like a reminder that I still mattered to someone. He was the only one who was truly interested in my life, the only one who cared, who hadn't forgotten about me. And so when I turned 30 and suddenly realized that I hadn't called him for a couple of months, I felt ashamed. Work had been crazy, and I was dealing with a mortgage, and I kept putting off calling until the phone rang on Tuesday night, and it was him. "Rita," he said, and his voice sounded different. Tired, muffled, like something had broken in it. "I need you to come over this weekend. There's something I need to talk to you about." My stomach clenched, my heart pounding in my chest. "Are you okay?" I asked. "We'll talk when you get there," he said quietly. "I love you, baby." He'd never said it like that before, not like that, not with that intonation. I spent the rest of the week anxious, unable to focus on anything. Saturday came and I drove to the house where so many events had taken place that had left an indelible mark on my memory, and although my hands were shaking on the wheel and anxiety was swirling in my chest, I knew that I had to be there, next to the one who had been a real support for me throughout my life. I had not been in this house for almost 6 months, and although the yard looked exactly the same as before, with a neatly trimmed lawn, with the same wooden fence, slightly slanted at the back door, and with the same flower bed by the porch where my mother planted her favorite roses every spring, everything felt different, as if the space itself had changed, becoming colder, quieter, more anxious, as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something irreversible. Mom opened the door, which was strange in itself, because usually it was Gasper who came out to greet me, climbed the steps, hugged me as if he hadn't seen me in years, and took the bags from the trunk, grumbling that I always carried too much stuff. Now she stood in the doorway in her old blue cardigan, her face tired but calm, and said, "Oh, Rita." Gasper is in the living room. There was neither warmth nor cold in her voice, just a statement of fact, and I stepped inside, already feeling how the air in the house had become somehow different, thick, heavy, like before a thunderstorm. I walked into the living room and saw him, sitting in his usual place, in the same chair with the worn armrest, where he always read the newspapers or watched TV, but he looked terrible. I noticed it right away. He had lost at least 13 kilograms. His face had become haggard, his eyes had darkened, his skin had become grayish, almost ashen, and my heart sank with horror, because I immediately understood that this was not simple fatigue, not overwork, this was something much more terrible and irreversible. "Sit down," he said, patting the sofa next to his chair, and his voice was weak, cracked, as if he was speaking with effort. I sat down, but did not take my eyes off him, trying to catch at least a drop of the old Gasper, the one who had always been strong, confident, kind. "Gasper, what happened?" I asked, and my voice sounded louder than I would have liked, because in the silence of the room every word seemed like a scream. He looked at me and said quietly, almost in a whisper, "The doctors found something. I have blood cancer. It's called acute leukemia." For a moment, it seemed as if the whole room had tilted, like a ship in a storm, and the air had become heavy, viscous, as if I were suddenly underwater. "What does that mean? Can it be cured?" I asked, clinging to my voice, to my breath, to hope. He shook his head slowly, carefully. "It's aggressive. They can try some treatments." But he paused, staring at his thin hands. "The doctors say I probably only have a few months left, maybe 6, if I'm lucky." I couldn't breathe. No, it couldn't be true. He was only 52. People beat cancer. They write about it, they talk about it, they make movies about it. Not like that. He said softly, "I've already gotten a second, third opinion. They all say the same thing." And then I burst into tears. I cried uncontrollably, like a child, like the day they told me my dad wouldn't be coming home anymore. I couldn't hold back my tears, I couldn't say a word. He reached out and took my hand, the same one he'd once held when he'd taught me to believe in myself. "I need to ask you something," he said, not letting go of my hand. "When I'm gone, you'll have to take care of your mom and Agatha. They'll need help, of course." I said through my tears, "Of course they will. Agatha is only 17, she'll be a senior in high school." He nodded, looking into my eyes. "And your mom, she's been out of work for years. I don't know how she'll cope." I squeezed his hand tighter. "I'll help them with whatever they need," I said. He smiled weakly and nodded. "I knew I could count on you. You were always so strong, so independent. But they're not like you. It's not going to be easy for them." I spent that evening with them. For the first time in years, Mom invited me to stay for dinner. The three of us sat at the same table where I used to study math, crying over problems and laughing when Gasper pretended not to know how to divide fractions. He barely ate, got tired quickly, and went to rest in his room, leaving us alone. Agatha was there, which in itself was unexpected, because usually when I came, she hid in her room, as if my presence was unbearable. "So," Mom said, passing me the mashed potatoes, "how's the work going?" I almost dropped my spoon. Her voice was warm, almost interested, and it seemed as if we had suddenly become an ordinary family, at an ordinary table. "Good," I answered, fussy, but good. "Last month I was promoted to senior account manager." Mom nodded. "That's great. You've always been so smart. Gaspard always brags about how well you do." I looked down, unsure of what to say. Agatha had been silent for most of the meal, but this time she didn't frown or snort. She listened. She even asked, "Do you live alone?" "Yes, it's just a one-bedroom apartment, but it's mine. It must be nice to have your own space," she said, and there was a politeness in her voice that had seemed impossible from her before. As I was leaving, my mother came up to me and hugged me, briefly, awkwardly, but sincerely. "Thank you for coming," she said. It meant a lot to Gasper, and to me. After that, I started coming every week. I spent Saturday nights with Gasper, who was getting weaker. We watched old movies, the ones he loved, sometimes just sitting in silence, wrapped in comfort and the unspoken, as if every word could destroy the fragile peace. He told stories from his childhood, about the first years with my mother, about how he was afraid of becoming a stepfather, but from the first minute he understood that I was his family. Once, when he was especially bad, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For leaving you with this mess, for not being there to help you sort it all out." I took his hand, dry, almost transparent. "You helped me more than anyone else. You saved me, Gasper. I don't know what would have happened to me without you." He smiled weakly, almost imperceptibly. "You would have been fine. You're much cooler than you think." The treatment didn't help. We hoped. We clung to every ray of light, to every encouraging word from doctors, to any offers from clinics, to articles from the internet in which someone, somewhere, supposedly beat leukemia at stage 4. But with each week he became smaller, more and more fragile, as if slowly dissolving in his own chair, in the pillows, in the house that he loved so much and which without him began to seem increasingly empty. But while he was fading, something amazing was happening, as if the very process of farewell and inevitability was changing not only Gasper, but also those who were near him. Mom, for the first time in many years, became almost tender, brought him water, made sure the blankets did not get crooked, stroked his shoulder, as he once stroked me as a child, and Agatha, amazingly, came out of her room, sat with us in the living room and even entered into conversations, sought my gaze, as if she wanted me to see she was here, she was present, she cared. Once, on one of those evenings, when the three of us were sitting by the window, and the silence seemed not burdensome, but almost solemn, Agatha said, "I'm thinking about specializing in psychology. I want to help people." I looked at her, carefully, truly, as never before, and said, "That's great, you really can do it." I said, not out of politeness or support, but because for the first time in my life I felt that maybe we really could be a family, maybe not like in the movies, but a real one, maybe scarred, but alive. Gaspard's illness, against all odds, had brought us together in a way that neither years nor memories nor even common blood ties could. He died on a Thursday morning, one of those foggy November days when the city seems to dissolve in a gray haze. My mother called me at work, and the only sound on the phone was her crying, dry, convulsive, almost soundless, but I understood right away. "He's gone," she kept repeating. "Rita, what should I do?" "He's gone." I rushed out of work without even explaining anything to my boss and drove home, along roads I knew by heart, with a heart that was beating so loudly that it seemed you could hear it from outside. At home, Mom was sitting on the couch, crumpled, with red eyes, a napkin in one hand, the other pressed to her lips. Agata was standing behind her, massaging her shoulders, and when I walked in, she ran up to me and hugged me tightly, really tightly. The funeral was hard, Mom cried through the entire service, not paying attention to those around her, and Agata sobbed, squeezing my hand until it hurt, as if she was afraid to let go. After the funeral, the three of us returned to the house, already without Gaspar, and the silence there was different now, not ordinary, but ringing, endless. Mom, wearily lowering herself onto a chair in the kitchen, said, "I feel so empty without him, I don't know what to do. He took care of everything, bills, insurance, mortgage. We spent all our savings on his treatment, we are practically broke." I sat down next to her, put my hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I will help in any way I can," because I had promised Gaspar, and because I knew there was no other way, and I kept my word. I started sending my mother $1,000 a month for utilities, food, all the necessities. When something broke at Agatha's college, I bought it. When their heating broke, I paid for the repairs. I don't know how to. "Thank you," my mother said during one of my visits. "You are saving us. I am so sorry for the way I treated you all these years. I was a terrible mother. Now I want to make amends." This was something completely new. There was no usual coldness in her voice, no fatigue, only sincere regret and a desire to somehow start over. Agatha had changed too. She would share news from college, ask for advice, talk about her friends, complain about exams, ask how I managed at her age. One day she said to me, "I can't afford a nice prom dress," and there was the same sadness in her voice that I had once felt. I immediately responded, "I'll buy you one, you're a senior, it should be a special day." I spent $400 on a dress, and she was so grateful, beaming, laughing, as if I had given her not just an outfit but an opportunity to feel important. "Thank you so much, Rita, this means so much to me." When Agatha graduated from high school, I was there in the audience, next to my mother, and when her name was called into the microphone, I clapped louder than anyone. After the ceremony, Agatha was the first to run up to me, hugged me tightly and said, "I did it, I'm going to college." And she did, at the State University, the same one where I studied, and I was proud of her, as if she were my younger sister. By blood, I was already making a plan to help her with the costs, tuition, books, dorm, whatever it would take. It seemed like everything was finally working out well. Agatha was starting a new chapter in her life. Mom was starting to find herself a little. She started to take care of the garden, baked pies, met with the neighbors, laughed. The three of us went on vacation. I bought Mom a car so that she could be independent. They often told me how much I meant to them, how grateful they were that I was there. And for the first time in many years I felt happy. I finally had the family I had dreamed of. For so long, a real, warm, mine. And then, at 6 in the morning, the phone rang, and Agatha, sobbing, could barely speak. "Mom won't wake up, it seems she's gone." I ran home as fast as I could, with a heart that already knew it was too late. Mom had died at 58. The doctor said her heart had simply stopped. No pain, no warning signs, just gone. One day she'd be baking a cake. The next she'd be lying in her bed, breathless. I handled the funeral, the flowers, the service, the paperwork, while Agatha, broken by grief, could barely function. She sat clutching a handkerchief, and kept saying, "What will I do without her?" She was my best friend. I hugged her and said, "You have me, we have each other," and in that moment I knew we could do it. We had. Agatha went back to college to take her finals, and I stayed behind to sort through Mum's things, and it was then, in the silence, alone, among her old letters and the closets of faded dresses, that everything fell apart. The day after the funeral, when the house, still smelling of lilies and wax, was once again filled with a ringing silence, I entered my mother's home office, the same room where she spent hours alone, typing some documents, sorting through papers, where old family photographs hung on the walls and forgotten books with dog-eared corners stood on dusty shelves. I began to sort through her papers, trying to do it methodically, as if it could keep my thoughts in order, but my heart sank from every page, from every scrap of her past, and then I found her will. A folder made of thick beige cardboard, carefully signed in ink. I opened it, expecting to see how my mother would finally fairly divide the property between me and Agatha, how she would make that last gesture that would show that she still considered me part of her family, but after reading the text, I felt my knees buckle. She had left the entire house to Agatha, completely. My name was not mentioned once, not in a line, not in a footnote, as if I had never existed. I stood there, staring at the lines, not believing my eyes, barely holding back the nausea rising in my throat. It was not just a surprise, it was a blow to the chest, to the very core of my idea that it was possible to convince someone, to earn love, to fix the past. But, as it turned out, not always. I was about to close the folder, when I suddenly noticed another piece of paper, lying separately, not hidden in an envelope or in another folder. It was a letter written in my mother's hand. I recognized her neat, slightly slanted handwriting right away. The letter was addressed to Agatha. There was no envelope, and I probably would not have dared to read it if I had not seen my name in the middle of the line. My heart started beating faster. I had to read it. It all started out calmly enough. Mom would write about her health concerns, mention her heart, complain about being tired, the usual, almost mundane phrases. But then, as if someone had suddenly dropped a mask, the text would become increasingly dark. "If something happens to me," she wrote, "keep pretending to love Rita so she can continue to pay for your college. I know it's hard, honey, but think of all that money. She's so desperate to be part of our family that she'll believe anything, just as I'm sick of her. I know you are too. I never loved her, not really. We only tolerated her for what she could give us. Once you graduate and don't need her money anymore, you can cut her out of your life completely. She'll never understand that she was never really our family anyway." I reread these lines 3 times, maybe 4. The words danced before my eyes, but the meaning was etched into my consciousness immediately, irrevocably. My hands were shaking, my breathing was ragged, my head was ringing, and there was such an emptiness inside that no words could fill it. Everything, every hug, every conversation in the kitchen, every thank you, everything turned out to be a fake, a carefully rehearsed game. They used me. For 2 years I lived in an illusion that they themselves masterfully created. I was overcome by an urgent need to understand, to get to the very bottom, and I took my mother's phone, left on the table, unlocked, as if she herself allowed me to enter her secret world. I went into the messages, and what I saw there made me literally double over in disgust. Their correspondence with Agatha was like a slap in the face. They called me a cash cow, laughed at my clothes, the way I spoke, the way I lived. "Oh my God, she's pathetic," Agatha wrote, "always trying so hard to make us like her. And now she actually thinks we're a real family. It's disgusting." Mom responded with laughing emojis and added, "Keep up the good work, honey, money's too good to waste." It got worse. Agatha complained about how hard it was to pretend to care about my silly work stories, and wrote that I gave her the creeps. Mom consoled her, "I know, honey, but think about your school fees. We can do it." I took screenshots of each message, recorded the letter, photographed everything on my phone, then slowly, very carefully, put everything back where it was. The letter on the table, the phone next to me, the will in the folder. I didn't want them to know, not yet. Then I went up to the guest room and just sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling, not thinking about anything, because thinking was unbearable. Everything I believed in, everything I tried for, everything I aspired to, turned out to be a fiction, a game, a well-thought-out manipulation. I felt broken. I gave them myself, my kindness, my faith, my money, my love, and all of this turned out to be just a tool in their hands. I stayed in the room, silently, as if the part of me that still hoped, still believed in a miracle had died inside me. 2 weeks later, Agatha came back from college. On the phone, she said that she had passed all her final exams, and her voice sounded tired, sad. I was still living in the house, supposedly helping with my mother's affairs, but really I was just waiting, watching, wanting to see, would she continue her role? Would she try to deceive me again? "Rita," she called as soon as she walked into the house, "are you there?" I was in the kitchen, making myself a coffee, and my hands were no longer shaking. The shock had passed, replaced by emptiness and cold understanding. In the kitchen, I answered calmly. She dropped her bags, ran to me, and, as always, hugged me. "I missed you so much," she said. "The last 2 weeks have been terrible. I wanted to call my mother all the time." She cried against me, and for one single moment I almost believed her, but then I remembered those messages, those words. She gives me the creeps. I hate pretending to care about her. "I know," I said, patting her back automatically, trying not to show the tremor that was running through me, and although her voice was sincere and her eyes were shining with tears, I could no longer see them as anything other than a carefully staged performance. "It'll take time." She pulled away, wiped her eyes, and sat down at the kitchen table, her gaze downcast, as if the weight of her loss had suddenly fallen upon her shoulders. "I'm so scared, Rita," she whispered, looking into her empty cup. "I don't know how to deal with all this adult stuff. Mom sorted it all out, and now she's gone, and I have 2 years of college left. Here it is," I thought, almost without surprise, almost without pain. She had already begun. "I was thinking," she continued, moving the cup closer to her, as if she were looking for support in it. "The house is mine now, by inheritance, right? But I can't afford to maintain it. The mortgage, the utilities, the taxes, it's too much, and I still need money for my studies. What are you going to do?" I asked, slowly sitting down opposite her, looking at her face, which again contained those same big sad eyes that, like no one else, knew how to inspire sympathy. "I don't know, maybe rent out a few rooms." She hesitated, and then, as if remembering a prepared line, looked at me with soft, practiced sadness. "Or, maybe you could help me run the house? I know it's too much to ask, but you're all I have left. We're family." The word family sounded so forced that I had to suppress a grin, but I nodded, keeping my expression impassive. I looked at the numbers. She continued, fishing for confidence out of thin air. "And if you could help out with, say, 1,500 a month, I could cover the rest with basement rent, and of course, I still need help with school and living expenses on campus. So it's not just the 1,000 I sent Mom, but now an extra 500 on top, plus college. I guess I really did undercharge for their fake love. That's a lot of money." "Agatha," I said with a wry smile, "and I'm not exactly a slob either." "I know," she nodded quickly, "and I feel terrible asking, but I don't have anyone else. Mom's gone, Gaspard's gone, you're the only person who's ever really cared about me." Her voice was shaking, her eyes were filling with tears, and if I hadn't known the truth, I might have already reached for my purse. "Let me think," I said, as gently as I could, as if I was genuinely hesitant. "Of course, I don't want to pressure you." She smiled encouragingly, covered my hand with hers, and whispered, "I hope you know how grateful I am for everything you've done for us. You've been the best sister anyone could ask for." Those words nearly made me sick. That evening, I watched her like an actress on stage. Agatha walked around my mother's office, pretending to look for important documents, although I knew she was simply checking to see if the letter was still there. I stood in the shadows in the hallway and watched her find it, unfold it, read it quickly, turn pale, then put it back as if nothing had happened. Then she picked up her mother's phone, scrolled through the messages, paused at them with a frown, and put them down too. In the morning, at breakfast, she returned to the role of the grief-stricken daughter. "I can't believe she's gone," Agatha sighed, stirring her coffee. "I keep waiting for her to come down and ask if I want pancakes. I couldn't take it anymore." I laughed, not quietly, not delicately, but loudly, desperately, with a heartbeat, the way people laugh when they've already understood everything and can't stand it anymore. Agatha looked at me as if I was crazy. "What's funny?" she asked. "You," I answered, still smiling. "This whole performance." I straightened up, looking her straight in the eyes. "You can stop, Agatha." "I know." Her face changed. It darkened like the sky before a thunderstorm. "And now what?" she asked, her voice becoming sharp, metallic. I took out my phone and put it on the table, opening the folder with the evidence. I know what you and Mom really thought of me. I know it's all fake. She went white, then suddenly red, her fingers clenched into fists, and I half expected her to try to lie, to deny, to blame it all on a bad joke, but then something flickered in her face, and she said, hoarsely, coldly, "So what?" And now her voice was completely different, hard, disdainful. "So what if it's fake? You got what you wanted, right? For once in your miserable life, you felt like part of a family. This is the real Agatha, not the one who cried on my shoulder, not the one who called me sister, but the one who hid behind a mask, laughing in text messages." "You're sick," she said, standing up, throwing money at us like handouts, "trying to buy love." It was embarrassing to watch. "I tried to help you," I said quietly. "Help?" She snorted and laughed, angrily, loudly. "You tried to squeeze into our family, like a pathetic parasite, Mom, and I laughed at your despair." Her eyes blazed with hatred. "How you were ready to do anything for a kind word from us, for the feeling that someone needed you. And now Dad is dead, Mom is dead, and I don't need you anymore." Now she screamed, no longer hiding anything, no longer pretending, no longer playing the part of a loving sister or a lost girl, all pretense gone, erased as if blown away by the wind through a wide-open door, and in her voice, full of malice and contempt, sounded the very truth that I had long known but still tried not to fully admit. "I never needed you. I always hated you. You are not my sister. You are nothing to me." I looked at her calmly, without blinking, and when a pause hung in the room, filled with her furious breathing, I said with the same calm with which someone might put a period to a letter, "All right, then you will get no more money from me." "All right," she screamed, throwing back her hair, "I don't need your money. I can take care of myself. I don't need some desperate loser trying to buy my love. Get out of my house right now." And I left. I packed my bag, took my time, carefully folded my things, which by this time had managed to spill out all over the guest room, put on my coat, opened the front door without looking back, and walked out, got into the car and drove back to my apartment, leaving behind the house that I had so long hoped to one day call my own. I felt strangely calm, empty, yes, but in this emptiness there was truth, painful, bitter, but true, and it was still better than living without knowing where pretense ends and reality begins. Over the next few months, I occasionally heard from friends of friends what was happening to Agatha. She had tried to rent out the rooms in the house, as she had planned, but, unaccustomed to a frugal lifestyle, to spending limits, to the need to plan, she quickly realized that the money was not enough, not for the mortgage, not for tuition, not for the pleasures to which she was accustomed. The house she had inherited turned out to be not a salvation, but a burden, and 6 months later I learned that she had sold it. Part of the money went to pay for the remaining years of college, and the rest she put into a savings account, promising herself to live modestly, meaningfully, like an adult. But, according to the stories, this did not last long. Agatha never learned to deny herself, did not know how to save, did not know what real savings were, and soon the money began to slip through her fingers like water. Clothes, trips, parties, expensive restaurants, photos on social networks with cocktails against the backdrop of sunsets. A year passed, and no one knew exactly where she was, what she was doing, and to be honest, I didn't even try to find out. I didn't care. She wasn't my sister, not my family, not my problem. She made that crystal clear. Sometimes, on quiet days when there's no need to rush, I go to the cemetery where my father and Gasper are buried, two people I truly loved and who truly loved me. I bring flowers, lilies that my mother liked, but I don't bring them to her, and not for her, but because Gasper once said that lilies have a special simplicity. I sit by their graves, sometimes just keeping quiet, sometimes telling Gasper about my life, how I got promoted last year, how I changed departments and now manage a whole team, how I dated one person with whom we had something resembling happiness, albeit short-lived. I think he would be proud of me, who I have become, who, despite everything, has preserved myself. I never visit my mother's grave. I have nothing to say to her. There is neither love nor hate towards her, only silence, emptiness. I am 33 now. I have built a decent life for myself, from scratch, without support, without guarantees, without real support. I have real friends who are with me not because I give them something, but because I am me, they don't need anything but me. I have a job that I love, and I am good at it. I have an apartment that is mine, not in theory, not on paper, but in essence. Every corner in it is my choice. Everything is my decision. I no longer have a family, and that's not a problem. I have me, and that, as it turns out, is enough. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.